Governor Tim Walz has been anything but perfect throughout the campaign with Vice President Kamala Harris, guys. In fact, he literally called himself stupid in the debate against JD Vance. Now I looked it up, and a knucklehead means a stupid person.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times.
Now, I also just want to kind of repeat that he's proud of his service to the community. His service being that he rode his bike with his buddies until the streetlights came on. Now, we're aware that Kamala Harris has a way with words, right? She also has word salads that she can toss for hours on end. But Tim Walz has made it abundantly clear that she's got competition. And guys, before we get started, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing. Let's jump in.
Because this started, and I love this story, as a young prostitutor. Kamala Harris talked about going in that courtroom for the first time. Kamala Harris, for the people. She's had one client. That's the people of this country. That's the people she's worked for.
A young what now, Tim? And it's this kind of talk that sealed his fate when he came face to face with JD Vance. A debate that many people consider to be one of the most one-sided debates in U.S. political history, with JD Vance wiping the floor with Tim Walz as he was fumbling on his own words. And you could say it's probably because he's a knucklehead. But others argue that it could be a Freudian slip, something that's very obvious with this one interview where he reveals how close he and Kamala Harris have actually gotten.
I plan on waking up on November 6th with Madam President, and then I will be.
I want to be clear, you won't be waking up together. No, unless you guys have gotten closer than we thought.
I have a problem about not being specific with my language, so thank you for that. Specifically right.
We'll go ahead and circle back to what he said about sleeping with the VP, but did you notice what he said? He said that he has a problem about not being specific with his language. That's a problem. Now, think about that. And then also imagine having this guy as your vice president, somebody who admits that they're stupid and that they have difficulties with how they can be misinterpreted. Now, just think of the possible conflicts that this can create overseas, because we know for a fact that Kamala Harris is completely clueless when it comes to foreign policy. And if you do send Tim Walz, there's a chance that he goes against what the U.S. actually wants. Do you remember this?
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. Mm-hmm. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
What position do you actually want, Tim? I guess it would be best to ask Kamala Harris that, right? Folks, we got a vice presidential candidate here who's willingly telling us that he is not fit for office. He's also shown that he's not even fit to pay for his own meals. I mean, look at this footage that shows both Tim Walz and second gentleman Doug Emhoff walking away from the cashier of their coffee shop without paying. Tim's daughter, who's seen at the end here, tells the cashier that someone with a campaign credit card will take care of the payment. Now, again, guys, it just shows how entitled these people are and how little they think of the working class. They don't care about us. Now, it's also a great representation of how this administration has worked. They've been handing out cash like candy to everybody else but the American people, even though they are aware that the money comes from us, the taxpayers. It's also representing a part of the Democratic Party that loves being provided anything that's free. Much like student loans. But again, it's not free. You and I as taxpayers will ultimately have to pay for all that stuff, even if we didn't get the education that we're paying for or the salary that came with it. And then you have Donald Trump, who does something like this.
Take the rest of it. Here, it's going to go down a little bit. It just went down $100. We'll do that for you from the White House, all right?
Thank you.
All right, bye. Nice seeing you, everybody. Beautiful. They're your kids?
Yeah, they are. 3 boys.
Perfecto. Perfecto. 3 for 3. Bye, everybody.
Not only did he pay for his own stuff, but he helped someone else pay for their groceries. A huge difference when you look at Tim Walz and Doug Emhoff.
When you go into politics, you have to be ready for every piece of dirty laundry from your past to resurface, and that's the case for Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. He's admitting there were tough times in his first marriage after a report claimed he cheated on his first wife with his daughter's teacher. Jim Murray explains.
Second gentleman Doug Emhoff is facing intense scrutiny today for an affair he had back in 2009 when he was married to his first wife, Kirsten. Emhoff and his first wife were living here in Los Angeles with their 2 children, Ella and Cole, when the affair began. The other woman was a teacher here at the Emhoff Children's private elementary school. She was 10 years younger than Emhoff, and he admits it cost him his marriage.
We also can't forget about the second gentleman who's being accused of abuse. His ex-girlfriend saying that he physically assaulted her back in 2012. His spokesperson has already refuted the claims, but it really hasn't stopped the questions from popping up. Now, there's also this talk about him impregnating a nanny from his first marriage, one that he acknowledged and actually admitted to. A nanny that he supposedly paid like $80,000 in hush money to. So where's the Doug Emhoff hush money trial like Donald Trump got, right? Which kind of reminds me that Donald Trump also paid some hush money, right? I mean, but as far as I know, he didn't get anybody pregnant. Doug Emhoff on his end was never prosecuted for his actions. And speaking of nanny, Tim Walz also made a huge blunder in this interview with Jimmy Kimmel. He said that he had Vice President Kamala Harris as a specific worker in his contacts.
You had their number, and is she in your contacts now so that that doesn't happen again?
She is.
Yes,
she is.
May I ask, how do you have the vice president listed in your contacts?
It's my dry cleaner.
That's what it says. Is it really? Is that right?
Yes. So
my dry
cleaner.
cleaner.
To come up with something. It's all I could think of.
Well, you're probably going to have to change it now.
Yeah, I know.
Now I want you guys to watch this video as many times as you need. Then I want you to think about having this guy in the White House. Can you imagine that? That's horrible. He and Kamala Harris make the perfect couple though. That is, if you're looking to take down the United States. I used to think that success was all about hard work, but no matter how hard I work, something was missing. Then I met somebody who showed me that the people around you make a huge difference in how far you can go. And that's when things started to shift for me. If you're ready for that shift, the Life Pursuit Network is here to connect you with people who are as serious about success as you are. It's about building relationships that help you to rise to the next level. For less than $1 a day, for less than a cup of coffee a day, you can join a community that is focused on elevating each other. Your financial future starts with the right connections. Make them today. Join us over in the Liberty Pursuit Network. Link in the description down below. Click the link today. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz claimed that illegal border crossings are down relative to when former President Donald Trump left office. For real? I'm not even sure what metric Tim Walz was referencing to in order for him to come up with this version of facts. Somebody should definitely check him for misinformation. Because see, there were over 2.7 million encounters by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol in fiscal year 2024. In fiscal year 2020, that clocked in just under 1 million. So yeah. Did Walz misspeak here like he did with the Tiananmen Square? Now, another classic Walz blunder is when the governor botched a response about school shootings. He said he's become friends with mass shooters. For real? You see, moderators asked Tim Walz how he changed his mind about banning assault weapons over his career. He said, "I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I became friends with school shooters. I've seen it." Now, he was probably referring to the victims of school shootings when he said this, but man, what a thing to say in an official vice presidential debate, huh? He became friends with school shooters? Anyway, pollster Frank Lutz, he said that Tim Walz's gaffe may be the worst line in any 2024 debate. Now, for me though, guys, nothing beats him calling himself a knucklehead. He was forced to admit he misspoke when they questioned his past claim that he was in Hong Kong during the 1989 Tiananmen Square student protest, where reports found that he traveled to Asia a couple of months after the protest took place. He had a rather winding response from there, even detailing his background coming from Nebraska, though becoming a member of Congress and eventually governor of Minnesota, before saying he can sometimes get caught up in the rhetoric. Well, that's a long way of saying he was caught in a lie, I guess. Introducing himself to the public. Now, looking at Senator JD Vance's performance to compare it, let's just say that Walz was blown out of the water. Many commentators say that Tuesday's debate represented the first time many Americans got an opportunity to hear from the Ohio senator at length, and Vance used the moment to humanitize himself and outline some of his biography. So Vance mentioned his mother, who struggled with a drug addiction multiple times throughout the evening, and by doing so, he was able to sympathize with Americans grappling with poverty and addiction issues of their own. The Republican vice presidential nominee talked about being raised in a working class family. His mother required food assistance for periods of her life. His grandmother required Social Security help to raise him, and she raised him in part because of his own mother struggling with addictions for a big chunk of his early life. He also mentioned going to college on the GI Bill after he enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so he said he's asking to be our vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. I mean, you gotta hand it to Vance. His life story really is the embodiment of the American dream. And this debate, guys, I think is just what he needed to get back on track. Because see, polling has suggested that Vance being relentlessly attacked by Democrats over all of his past comments is unpopular with voters and less liked than Tim Walz. Now, a Gallup poll published just a few days ago showed 46% of registered voters said that the view of Walz as either an excellent or pretty good choice for vice president, compared to only 41% who said the same for JD Vance. Now, guys, with that being said, the debate could still help JD Vance improve those figures, both because of the skill that he showed as a debater and the details he gave about his background. Post-debate flash polls definitely gave JD Vance the win in that debate. A CNN survey of debate watchers found that 51% felt JD Vance won. Meanwhile, 49% said that Tim Walz won. And that poll already oversampled Democrats by about 5 percentage points. Another thing about CNN's vice presidential debate instant poll, it has pegged the winning ticket in 3 of the last 4 presidential elections, with the lone exception being Paul Ryan, whose 48 to 44% poll win over Joe Biden in 2012 did not translate to an electoral success. So CNN's own poll may just be turning red just in time for November, if you guys know what I mean. And they're not the only one either. Debate host CBS News also released a flash poll, which found that 42% of debate watchers believe JD Vance won.
What JD Vance had that was most made him most likable and most trusted was that he was authentic. I mean, it was really, you could just say it in one word. JD Vance was authentic. His body language, he did make hand movements and so on, but they were just to explain what he was saying. It wasn't sort of to hide anything, or it wasn't to exaggerate anything. It was just with what he was saying. When people watch the debate, an important part of it is the overall impression, how you feel when you're listening to each candidate. You're not going to remember necessarily everything that they said about a specific issue, or you may already know what they're going to say about a specific issue. But what's more important is how they came across. Would you like to be a person living in a country that was ruled by this person? So JD Vance came across as being very steady. Like, you could kind of see him as a captain of the ship. And he wasn't too stiff, but you knew what you were going to get each time. He seemed sure of himself. He seemed, the main thing was he seemed authentic. And so you felt like you would be safe with him. Whereas with Tim Walz, he was all over the place. He was very nervous. And also he had signs, body language signs of lying. And he was just all over the place. His body language was discordant with what he was saying. It was like too much. It made you feel exhausted and scared when you would be listening to him if you were in his land. For the first question, for example, that was about Israel. And Tim Walz, you first saw him ohing and umming and grimacing. And, he didn't, in the end, he didn't even come up with the answer. But it was all this, lots of movement, lots of, extraneous kind of movement. And then, whereas Tim Walz just gave the answer, I would let Israel decide what they wanted to do. So, throughout it was 90 minutes. Throughout the interview, you would either find yourself getting more and more nervous, anxious, irritated by Tim Walz, whereas you were beginning to feel calmer and as though things were going to be okay with JD Vance.
So like Dr. Lieberman said, you guys, with JD Vance, you felt like things are going to be okay. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, you had Tim Walz, who felt like a guy that's uncomfortable around real men. You know that type? I know that type. The real beta men. Anyway, but yeah, there's no denying it, guys. I mean, even CNN had to give it to JD Vance and criticize the Minnesota governor's debate performance. Check this out.
I think there was a clear lack of preparation and execution here on Walz's part.
I think actually it's the opposite. I think he had too much preparation.
Maybe, yeah.
He had so many lines that he was clearly trying to say that he didn't listen and said when JD Vance said one of the many things he really hit Kamala Harris on, not Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris, he didn't respond because he clearly had things in his mind. I think the lack of interviews that he has done with national media, with local media, it showed. He needed more reps.
Whoops, I think Dana Bash just let it slip, guys. As the CNN host put it, the lack of interviews that Vance has done with national media, with local media, it showed he needed more. Later in the show, Jake Tapper also acknowledged JD Vance is much more experienced with this at public speaking and defending himself and pivoting. Meanwhile, Anderson Cooper concluded that Walz seemed nervous on stage. Now, honestly, guys, if there was one thing that I took away from this debate, it's that Governor Walz called himself a knucklehead. I mean, you got to agree with him on that one, right? Is he a knucklehead or not? Especially since he chose to accept the debate invite in the first place. But yeah, for those of you guys who didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, I have compiled my own top moments from the only VP debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz before the election. You guys ready for this? Well, first really was the Vance highlight when the senator fact-checked CBS News moderators. How's that for turning the tables, huh? So it looks like the man learned from what happened to Donald Trump at the rigged ABC debate, and this time he turned the fact check around on the moderator. You see, after CBS News' Margaret Brennan offered an impromptu fact check in response to JD Vance describing cities being overwhelmed by illegal immigration, noting that many Haitians in Springfield, Ohio have been granted a legal status, JD Vance hit back at her for violating the terms of the debate. He said that it is important to say what's actually going on. He explained how there's an application called the CBP-1 app where you can go on as an illegal immigrant, apply for asylum, or apply for parole to be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand, at which point CBS decided to cut off his mic. And let me say, guys, this was one of the most shameful moments in a long history of shameful moments by moderators biased against Republicans. They supposedly fact-checked the truth, then stopped the politician from responding. I mean, that's just straight up censorship at this point. Am I right, guys? But again, JD Vance, he handled it like a champ, and that counter fact check moment is for sure to earn him some brownie points with former President Donald Trump and other Republicans for an aggressive exchange with the moderators. But it wasn't just that moment that made this a Vance masterclass. You see, he showed compassion when he told Walz that he was sorry to hear that his son had been witness to a shooting. He said that he didn't know that Walz's 17-year-old son witnessed a shooting, and he's sorry about that. Governor Walz responded and said that he appreciated. And JD Vance remarked, "Christ have mercy." Like I said, guys, truly a masterclass from the Republican vice presidential nominee. And these moments of compassion certainly didn't even stop JD Vance from tearing into Kamala Harris. He said that the American citizens have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border, and he thinks that Tim Walz actually wants to solve the problem. But then he said he doesn't think that Kamala Harris does. Now, as for Governor Walz, the man just made mistake after mistake, so people just kind of felt sorry for the guy after the VP debate. For one, Walz claimed that there would be a registry of pregnancies under what he said was Trump and Vance's Project 2025. He said it was going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access entirely, to infertility treatments. Now, first off, Vance denied this claim, saying that no, certainly they won't, and two, The Project 2025 has nothing to do with Donald Trump. In fact, it's an endeavor of the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Even Paul Dans, the conservative director of the group behind the conservative policy roadmap Project 2025, said that former President Donald Trump had nothing to do with the Heritage Foundation-backed policy playbook forged by dozens of different organizations. Now, as for the Democratic lie that Donald Trump wants a national abortion ban, well, he's long made it very clear that he would not back a federal abortion ban. And on the same day as the VP debate, Donald Trump went on social media saying that everyone knows he would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances and would, in fact, veto it because it's up to the states to decide on the will of their voters, the will of the people. Now, something else that Donald Trump commented on regarding the VP debate, Walz's excessive note-taking. He said that Walz has taken so many notes, never seen a candidate take more. He needs the notes to keep his brain intact. Now guys, I did a previous video where I covered how the VP is doing so poorly that even the host of The View can't save her. Make sure you guys watch that video after this one, but as always, thank you guys so much for your time today. Thank you for hitting the like button and subscribing. I'll see y'all next time.